Hi, and welcome to Single Daddy Daily. I'm Evan DeMarco here with my great friend Drew Manning, and you guessed it, we are single dads. I've got a 5-year-old daughter, and Drew's got 2 daughters, 9 and 7.
How do we juggle the responsibilities of raising our kids, co-parenting, working, and even dating? The Single Daddy Daily podcast is the honest and complicated journey of two guys navigating the waters of single parenthood. Join me, I'm Drew, and Evan in a raw look at what it takes to balance a successful career, dating, and most importantly, being a present parent. Together or with guests, we're going to tackle many of the difficult topics that so many of us parents face.
On this show, we are coming at you with stories, interviews, and more to discuss a topic that affects almost half of all people who get married and have kids: what it's like to be a single parent.
I'm Melissa Urban, very grateful to have you here on the podcast, the Single Daddy Daily podcast. Evan, you're here in Utah.
I am here in Utah, yes.
Versus LA. You are the second guest we've had on the show, just
Oh,
FYI.
that's exciting.
Yes, behind Heidi Powell. So you're in good company.
Okay, I am in good. I was going to say who was number one, but it's Heidi Powell, so okay.
Yeah, and she flew all the way out to LA to see us.
That's
and
nice.
We're here in your home
So
state.
we're setting a precedent, though. We bring successful, influential, incredible women on the podcast
Yes.
I
to
like
talk about Single Daddy Daily.
Yeah.
We have to balance it out.
We do.
Yeah.
We're two single dads, so
Yeah.
everyone knows that. But this is Single Parents Daily, right? Because we are really focused on, helping people transition, men, women, whatever, through the divorce.
Yeah.
And being better parents. So let's jump in. Tell us a little bit about yourself for the Single Daddy Daily listeners who have no idea who you are.
Yes.
And even for those who do.
Yeah, so I am the Whole30 co-founder and CEO. I founded Whole30 about 10 years ago, co-founded, and I've written 8 books on the Whole30 at this
Just a
point.
few.
Yeah,
Just a few books,
Yeah, and I'm a single mom of a 6.5-year-old boy. His dad and I split when he was about 1, so basically the only parenting I've done has been like single parenting. And I'm using quotey fingers because I am at some point going to talk about all the privilege I have in this area of parenting.
I would love to. There's different terminology for, single parenting versus a full-time single parent. Like there's so many differences there. And we definitely want to clarify, the difference between those two because, it is different. Being a full-time single parent versus being a half-time single parent.
Yes.
There's difference. But before we do, you have a very interesting background and story. I would love to kind of dive into that because you are in a place now. If you don't follow Melissa, you definitely need to on social media. I love your vulnerability. Let's talk about, a little bit about your past. And then if you could, at the end, talk to us about when vulnerability became a strength for you. Because I'm assuming you probably didn't grow up with it like that.
No.
Do you want to
Perception.
send the arm out right now?
What's the arm?
Yeah, because we're videotaping.
Oh, yeah,
So,
vulnerability is strength.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry, I was like, put my arm out. What am I doing?
Are we holding hands while we do this or something?
We're going to sing Kumbaya on it a little bit.
So, growing up, I grew up in New Hampshire. My parents were married. It was a very, kind of typical. My mom stayed home with us while my dad worked. But at the age of 16, I had sexual abuse. I was abused by a family member. And that sort of set the course of the trajectory for the rest of my life. I grew up in a big Catholic family where if you didn't talk about it, it didn't exist. So we did not we didn't talk about my trauma. We didn't unpack it. I went to therapy, but, was largely unsuccessful with it because the messages I think I was getting and I had internalized was like, if you just don't talk about it, and I felt a lot of guilt and shame. And as a result of trying to escape that, I turned to drugs when I was about a senior in high school. And I became a drug addict. I used heavily for about 4 or 5 years before finally going to rehab and successfully recovering. And so I've been in recovery for 19 years now. It's been quite a long time.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
It's not easy.
Thank you. But after coming out of recovery, that's what really prompted me to get into things like fitness and pay attention to my diet. I revamped every single area of my life because I knew I had to do that to stay in recovery. I knew I had to change everything and really start to see myself as a healthy person with healthy habits. So I began, running, and I did some triathlons. I got really into CrossFit. In 2006, I owned a CrossFit gym, and that's really kind of the genesis of the Whole30 nutrition program. It started as a self-experiment in 2009 and kind of showed me all the ways that I was using food like I used to use drugs. So things kind of came around full circle for me then.
That's a topic unto itself. We could,
Yes.
Yeah, it is. I talk about my addiction very freely in the Whole30 community because I find that unless I mention that, I don't really have a lot of street cred in that I've never had an eating disorder. I've never felt out of control with food. I've never had a problem with like my weight. But when people say, well, how do you understand what it's like to feel out of control with food? You know, drugs and food are really not that different from a psychological perspective. But
the triggers in your brain are pretty much the exact same.
They are, yeah. And even the cycle that it promotes of like craving and overconsumption and the guilt and the shame and the hating yourself and the isolation it brings and the stress that that causes, which leads you to go back to the same thing that you kind of hate yourself for. Like I could be talking about sugar or I could be talking about drugs.
Yeah.
But vulnerability did not come into my life for a very long time. I would say not until I was in the process of my divorce.
Yeah.
For a number of reasons. It took a lot of therapy to go through my trauma and kind of process that. And then my marriage for such a long time was kind of, I want to use a swear word here. How can I say a dumpster fire? Yeah. Let's just say that. And again, there's never any blame or anything here, but like we did the best we could and it just wasn't that good. And so when you're in the middle of this relationship, not to mention like a very public relationship, he was my co-founder and business partner, and then the relationship isn't going well, the last thing you want to do is be vulnerable. I had to project this image of like, things are great, we are great. And it wasn't until things really fell apart that I finally was like, okay, we got to try something else because this like pretending is not working.
So something fascinating, and this is, I don't know if you know any of my story, but we divorced when my daughter was 1.5 years. And we're seeing that this is more and more common where couples are getting divorced when the kids are so young. My question to you is, did you, like a lot of people we've talked to, look at having a kid as kind of a way to save your marriage?
No.
Okay.
No. There was a period of time where we had been going through counseling and like things seemed better. And it was like, well, maybe now is a good time to like start thinking about it. And we kind of pulled the goalie because I know that it normally takes a lot of time. And I got pregnant in like 2 minutes. And it left me no time to think about or process whether this was the right move for us. And like really soon into my pregnancy, the wheels really started falling off the bus. So it was not a conscientious, like maybe this is going to help things. Like there was zero of that in my head. It was really just a weird timing thing. Literally the whole purpose of my relationship, of my marriage, was to produce this child. Like that is why we came together. That was our life contract. And that's how it worked.
Yeah. So quick question, we'll get back to that topic in a second, but when you were talking, it just brought up this thought of your first book, it starts with food. A lot of this, of what you went through, that was the premise to this book, am I right? It starts with food and how you and your mental and emotional health correlates with physical health and food specifically, because a lot of people don't see that connection. I don't think a lot of people don't see the connection between what does what I eat have to do with my sanity or my problems that I deal with on a day-to-day basis with my relationships. And it was that book for me coming from the health industry where I started to look at food differently because of your book. Usually when you come from the fitness industry, you look at macros, proteins, fats, and carbs. How can I manipulate these to get the body I want, right? And, you don't care about anything else if you look good. Like, if you look good, you're like, all right, I got it under control. But I think that opens up a whole new perception of it does start with food. Your mental and emotional, even spiritual health, I would say, is tied to, your nutrition.
Well, this is the gut-brain connection that we're starting to understand so much about. So, we can talk about that from the standpoint of what does that do, to yourself emotionally. And fats, proteins, carbs, macro, it's all ego-driven.
Yeah.
And when we start looking at divorce, when we start looking at food, all of these things, it's removing your ego from the equation. And
Yeah.
It's twofold, right? You have the physiological impact of your food choices on your mental health. So there's sort of the cytokine model of depression that says depression is kind of an inflammatory condition. So if you have foods in your diet that are promoting inflammation, there are a lot of correlations between gluten and dairy and sugar and artificial sweeteners and some mental health conditions. So you've got that physiological model. But then from an emotional model, what I've learned through Whole30 is that when people feel in control of their food, not in an overly restrictive eating disorder way, just meaning they feel like they're eating in a way that serves them. It gives them so much capacity to manage stress in other areas of their life. It is such a foundational relationship with us, maybe because it is so highly emotional.
Yeah.
So when I have someone going through a period of stress like a divorce and they're like, man, what can I do? If you have the emotional capacity to do a Whole30, I think you'll find that will spill over in a positive way in every area of your life in ways that, taking on exercise or meditation probably won't.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And it's not like all your troubles are going to go away by changing your diet. Like, I'm all of a sudden happy now that even though I'm going through a divorce, but it can help with the symptoms.
Well, think about it this way.
that
How many
stress.
people go through a divorce and they feel so out of control? I can't control anything.
Yes.
I've got my ex. And it's like, you're so reactive in that whole process. The small things of being able to take control of your diet for 30 days.
Oh, and also if you're sleeping a little bit better and your energy is a little bit more stable and your focus is a little more concentrated, like all of these things play into you feeling like you now have more capacity to manage all the stress that comes along with a divorce.
Where the hell were you 4 years ago?
I know.
Exactly.
Hire her as your divorce consultant.
This is really the first time I talked about it in the context of divorce,
Yeah.
though, and I think it's part of why I will say that my divorce was one of the happiest times in my life. Yeah.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Well, and a lot of this is reframing. We've talked a lot about this, the two of I, but you get to that point where you have to reframe things.
Yes.
You have to look at the positive things. You have to look at how divorce changes you positively if you allow it to, and then move on from there rather than just getting stuck in that, just the same cycle of bad thoughts.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
let's kind of move past Whole30, if that's okay.
Of course.
All right, we'll come back to that.
Yeah.
So where did we leave off? No, I don't remember. We were
Oh,
talking
boy.
about
Vulnerability.
Yeah.
If
That's
we
right.
could kind of touch on that because I wanted to make sure we transition with that. So, because I have a similar situation, being in the public eye, going through divorce, you have this mask kind of you have to wear out in public. When was it for you that helped you take that courage to step into the arena, like Brene Brown talks about, and let go of what other people are going to think of you? What was that transition in your mind? Like, when did that happen for you to say, okay, this is my first vulnerable post, and you're scared to death? But then now you look back on that, you're like, you've been doing this for years now, and it gets easier.
Yeah, it very much happened in phases.
Okay.
It was certainly not this is the giant mask I was wearing and I'm going to take off all my armor and just show up exactly as I was. It definitely happened in phases. I honestly think the genesis of it was when I changed my training. I stopped, I was training at CrossFit and I trained at Jim Jones for a long time, and I was using the gym to punish myself, right?
Yeah.
I know that one.
And when I decided to kind of transition into this, what I call year of strong and bendy, where I was focusing not just on building strength. I had built so much strength that I was brittle. I think the reason that I started to become more vulnerable is because I just broke. I broke. I couldn't do it anymore with the dissolution of my marriage and the way that it was kind of ending in such a public setting. So I changed my training and I decided that I was going to focus on strength with flexibility and that I was going to bring some softness into my practice and into my life. And I feel like because I was able to access that through the gym, which felt a little bit easier to manage and bring some softness in, that it then started showing up in other areas of my life, like being able to show up on social media a little more authentically.
Yeah. Yeah, and you've done an awesome job of building a very, very authentic brand. And I definitely want to get into some more about that in a little bit. I kind of want to talk about parenting, though. During this time of transition of your life, going through a divorce in a public eye, having a kid, did that help you to have a kid in that situation? And if so, how, versus, let's say you didn't have a kid, like being a parent in this situation? I mean, it's hard to put your brain in that place of what would it be like without my kid, but.
Oh no, I know exactly what you mean.
Okay, cool.
You know what? It's it did help. And here's why. If I didn't have the kid, I would have bolted.
Yeah.
There would have been nothing tying me to Utah, nothing tying me to my ex-husband anymore, after the business split was finalized, and I probably would have bolted.
Yeah.
And in that bolting, I probably would not have had an opportunity to sit in my feelings and process what had happened. And so because I had the child and because we were both tied here and we were both committed to co-parenting, I was forced to stay here. I was forced to maintain a relationship with my ex for the sake of the child. I was forced to, reevaluate my worth and my value now that I wasn't providing my son with this, perfect nuclear family. So yeah, I think it really did make a huge difference in how I chose to process the divorce.
Awesome.
Well, I think, it's funny. You and I have very similar stories because people always ask me, like, what would you have done if you hadn't had your daughter? I'm like, I would have been on the next plane.
Yeah, to like Thailand.
Very far away.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because also having a kid grounds you and it gives you that thing to focus on. It's that path of positivity when you're going through the divorce because it's like everything is just falling apart. It's the lawyers, the finances, all of that. It's like, well, I still have to show up and be a parent.
Yeah.
Yes.
Interesting.
It's interesting, and I guess I wonder too, from a standpoint, we need to talk to some people who've gone through divorce without kids. Is it easier than with kids? Because there is also that contentiousness. You've got something that's so important to both people, and you're fighting over that.
See, I think in my instance, it helped because at any moment, one or the other of us had moments of weakness where we like snapped at each other. We were not kind to each other. I think that's typical in any divorce. And maybe even a little bit of like using the kid against the other person because it was the one thing that meant the most to us. But because we had the child, I think, at least from my perspective, I was much more compassionate and much kinder to my ex than I would have been without.
Interesting.
Like it made me a better person because I had to show up as a better person for the sake of my child.
Yeah. I think a lot of people lose sight of that. I think sometimes in certain situations with divorce, people are out to get the other person. Like, you did this to me, so I'm going to do this to you. And unfortunately, the kids are the ones that suffer because of that. And so
They're the greatest leverage point.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's sad to see that. If you could go back and give yourself advice, or other parents out there listening that maybe had a bad divorce, how do you talk to your ex for the sake of your kid? Like, what are some maybe tips or things that you've learned over the years that you could give to other parents out there? It's like, I hate my ex, but how do I save the co-parenting relationship? Like, what are some things that have worked for you?
Yeah, so I'm very lucky in that I do not hate my ex, and I would say he says the same thing. I think the thing that was the most helpful was I had very strong and continue to have very strong boundaries around the talking points.
Boundaries, awesome.
There's no one that knows how to push your buttons better than your ex.
Yes.
And like, again, in that moment of divorce, like it really does bring out the worst in all of us. So creating those strong boundaries where it was like, I will speak to you about the kid, but we're not going to talk about our personal lives. I don't know. People would say to me like, well, what's he doing for work now? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't want to know. Like, this is his life now and it's his business. So I stay in my own business. I had some boundaries for a while where we didn't speak in person because that was very acrimonious. It was difficult for both of us. So we talked via email or via text message only, and also so I could have a written record so that in case there was any miscommunication, we could easily go back and see. And then I think the other thing that I would just have told myself is that time smooths everything over. Just, if you can hold your tongue in this one moment, I guarantee that by the next day, you're going to be able to find that compassion and that empathy, that you'll be very proud of yourself for showing up as your highest self, and that time, will smooth this relationship over to the point where I think the longer we're divorced, the easier it is for us to co-parent effectively.
Yeah, I think that's awesome advice. Like, I think it's really good. And you're really good with boundaries too. That's the key word, boundaries, and sticking to them.
Yes.
Because I think people put it out there, but then they don't have the strength to stick to those boundaries and say, this is my boundary, you crossed it, and that's not okay. Being able to speak up for yourself. And that goes for any relationship too.
The reason that you set boundaries is so that you can both show up in this relationship as your highest self. Boundaries are not just about protecting me, it is about preserving the relationship. And had I not set those, it probably would have devolved. He probably had his own set of boundaries as well.
Yeah.
This is one of the things we really like to talk about, though, is I love how you said email communication. Yeah. And one of the things that I got into the habit of doing was always looking at my communication as if someone else was watching, right? How's the judge? How's the lawyer? And it became a very reactive approach to communication. But then once I flipped it, it's like, okay, no, if I'm approaching every communication with my ex through the eyes of how is this going to look, then you actually start to be more empathetic. You start to be more, it's kind of the fake it till you make it type of thing.
Yeah.
And that's hard because,
Yeah. I honestly had Michelle Obama's, like, when they go low, we go high. That was my mantra
nice.
through a lot of it. And again, this is not like about my ex, always being the bad guy. We each had our moments.
Yeah.
But I found that every time he could kind of go a little low and I could just sort of take a deep breath and rise above it, I felt better about myself because it only hurts me to kind of fight fire with fire. And we evolved in terms of our co-parenting relationship.
Heidi said something on her last podcast, which is great. And I always want, you're only as strong as your weakest link in your co-parenting relationship. So building the other person up becomes the truest key to success.
Yeah.
It's like, just take a step back and it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
Whatever they're doing.
Yeah.
In the moment, it's huge, but a week, a month, a year, it doesn't matter.
That's very true and hard to implement in the moment.
Oh yeah, exactly.
That's very true.
And this is why it's so contentious, right? This is why we have so many issues with parenting after divorce. How do you take a step back and say, okay, this is pissing me off. I'm ready to blow my top, but if I do that, it's only going to end badly.
Yes.
If I can take that step back, if I can cool off.
Yeah.
So sounds like you did that. Did you have any, you got your Michelle Obama thing. Did you do anything else that was really kind of a catalyst for success when you're so fired up and ready to?
I remember times where either he or I would go low and the other person would allow a little bit of time and space, like sometimes literally just not even responding to the text message. And I can't think of a time where the other person didn't come back and say, that was a little harsh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And in that moment, then the other one would show grace. I understand, this is really hard, thank you. And I think that's so important, not only to show yourself grace in that moment for when you want to explode, but to extend that to the other person.
Yeah.
That's a great tip.
That's beautiful. And I remember what I was going to say now. It finally came to me. Time. I've had quite a few people reach out to me recently going through a divorce. They found inspiration and motivation either from the podcast or my story. And, I'm sure you get people reaching out to you too. They want it to be fixed right away. Like they want it to go away. Like what books did you read? Who was your life coach? Like I just want this phase to go away. And I have to tell them you have to embrace the pain, the hurt, the suck. You have to let it be. Don't rush the process. This part is so important for you because we're all speaking from a few years experience post divorce now, where we put in the work with therapy, life coaching, reading, meditating, still finding ourselves, still working on improving it. And I think people just want to get to that point. Like, how do I get to where you're at? And
most people do, and that's why they jump into the next relationship, and that's why second marriages have a 60 to 65% divorce rate, because you're not putting in the time, you're not working on it, you're not doing the things you need to do.
I honestly thought about it as it is a grieving process.
Yeah.
It is a process of grief, just like when you have a loss. You're grieving the death of the relationship. Yeah. You're grieving the death of the promise of the relationship, because no one goes into a marriage thinking it's probably going to end in divorce. Yeah. You have all these aspirations and plans, and you make promises to each other, and you can't rush that grieving process. Yeah.
And that we talked about this in one of our podcasts, but it is like the death, but then you have to see that person. So when someone dies, you go through that process and they're out of your life. Now you're kind of feeling the same way, but you see them all the time.
Yeah. Okay. Transitioning a little bit. I love your content on social media. I love how authentic and vulnerable and meaningful it is, and very inspiring. And one of the things that you talked about recently was your son painting his nails. And I'll let you kind of talk about it. You kind of just tell us the story and then the response.
Yeah. My son is 6. He likes dinosaurs, trucks, Legos, and he likes bright painted fingernails and toenails. I've been painting his nails since he was as little as I can remember. I'd come home with a new manicure, or I'd be painting my own toenails, and he would say, "Will you paint my nails?" And it started off just painting thumbs. And now he likes every nail a different color, and he will paint his toes, and he really loves it. And he's gone to school and he's gone to camp with his painted nails. But it wasn't until this past summer that we were at a little staycation at a hotel, and there were some older boys there who were making fun of his nails. Like, "Oh, you've got girl nails. Why do you have girl nails? Why are your fingernails painted?" He goes to a pretty progressive school where no one questioned it, so he's never had to deal with that. And in the middle of this vacation, he came and kind of crawled onto my chair with me, and he said, "Mom, I want to take my nail polish off." And it's breaking my heart, right? So we had this long talk about it, but over the course, and we ended up talking about it. He did not. The kids all moved on very, very quickly. In fact, one of the kids was really cute. He was like, I don't even have a nail on this finger. And then everything was fine. But it prompted a lot of discussions about how, what really matters is if you like it. Do you like it? And if you like it, it doesn't really matter what the other kids think. Like, I don't love your Batman flip-flops. Do you like them? Yeah. Okay, well, great. Then that's all that matters to you. And we practiced some phrases that he could say when other kids make fun. We ordered some books on tolerance and acceptance. There's a book called I Love My Colorful Nails that we read together.
Wow. That was perfect.
So I shared about it on Instagram, and I just said, like, we are so vocal about telling our girls that they can be anything they want to be. They can be strong. They can be assertive. They can be, construction workers or doctors or lawyers. Girls can be anything. Why can't we teach our boys that it's okay if they want to have colorful nails or wear dresses or, play with a tea set? Like, we have to do this both ways.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
And the amount of support I got on that post was overwhelming. It made my mama heart so happy. So I was flooded with photos of parents sending me pictures of their little boys with their nail polish and in dresses and with their, frozen Elsa costumes on. And it was just so heartwarming, I think, to have that connection.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, and you're teaching self-love. I mean, we talk about it post-divorce as getting back to that point of self-love, but we should be teaching our kids that.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with painting your nails or wearing a dress or, whatever you want to do.
He's 6.
Yeah.
They're pretty and colorful,
You should see, my daughter paints my toenails, and it's awesome.
I sent her a picture of Kalea painting my nails, and I don't mind. They'll make me jewelry and I'll wear it, and
We do mud mass once a week. It's like there are no lines anymore. It's
moment.
There shouldn't be.
No.
Yeah.
There shouldn't be.
So I'm hoping I can ask this question. Was the conversation the same with his dad?
Yeah.
Did he? Okay.
His dad and I have talked about it, and his dad's on the same page. Yeah, same page, same message. I don't know that his dad paints his nails at his house because he doesn't have nail polish and doesn't wear it. But we are on the same, absolutely on the same page with that. Where he, I've explained to him the talks that we've had, and the messages that we're sending, and for sure.
Totally curious because I was wondering, in certain situations, if one parent disagrees with the other parent on a thing like that, what do you do in that situation?
It is hard. I heard from some parents who were like, I would love to support my son in this, but my dad, his dad kind of shames him.
Yeah.
Or tells him and that's a very difficult situation. I think that has to be handled at the parent-to-parent level, maybe getting into some counseling or therapy to talk about it. Clearly that says more about the father than it does about the child's choices. But, we already have so many damaging narratives from society that our kids are forced into just because they are growing up in this culture. I feel like as parents, it's our obligation to dismantle as many of those as we possibly can.
Absolutely.
Last question from this is, when you talk to him about what the other kids said, how do you not get upset or angry or when other kids are because your kid might get picked on at some point.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that situation?
So,
How do you not be the helicopter guy, right?
Yeah. What I want to do is step in and use my words to decimate that child and make him cry, because I totally could, because he's 10 and I write for a living. But I recognize how important it is for him to figure this out for himself. So what we do is we practice at home.
Cool.
What are some things that you could say if someone laughs at your nails, Well, I could say something like, his favorite is it's just paint, dude.
Yeah.
It's just paint. Right? Or I like them and it doesn't matter. Or sometimes they'll say, your nails look like a girl, and he'll say, so what?
Yeah.
And he really likes that. So we practice this, and we've kind of role played at home. And in the moment, I have to sit back and kind of let him handle it.
Yeah.
And when he came to me and said, I want to take it off, I said to him, if you really want to, I'll do that for you. But I need you to think about whether this is something you want to do or whether you're feeling like you have to because these other kids are telling you. And he came to the right decision on his own, which made me happy. The other strategy that we use for things like picking on or bullying is agreeing with the bully. Yeah. Your nails look silly. Yeah, they totally do, don't they?
Yeah. Just reframe it.
There's nothing else to pick on. If wow, your nails are weird. Yeah, they are weird.
Yeah.
There's nothing else you can say to that.
Yeah.
So we've practiced that at home in a safe environment, and I've observed him doing it in the wild. Yeah.
How often has it become a problem?
not very often. I think kids, the one thing I also explained to him is that kids are sometimes just curious. They're not making fun. They've just never seen a boy with painted nails, which is part of why I asked my community to send me their pictures, because one of the things my son said to me that day is, I've never seen another boy with his nails painted. And when he got home, I showed him 100 photos. Look at this little boy. Look at this little boy. Look at this rock star. Look at this baseball catcher. Look at this guy who's doing a pedicure with his daughter.
I'll send you a picture of my toes.
And all of a sudden, he was like, oh, this is a real thing. He didn't feel so alone.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Man. So such great. I'm so glad you talked about that, because that is very interesting. In the public, you see a lot of stuff. We want to raise strong girls, empower women, but you don't see a lot of it from the other perspective of like, it has to be the same way for our boys, for the sons out there. Because no one really talks about that.
No, this is interesting. I read an article about this, because we are kind of, we're shepherding women, how to be strong, how to break the glass ceiling, and we've almost forgotten about the boys. And now we've got an entire generation of guys that are sitting around, at 20, 25, 30 playing video games, and they can't grow up.
Yeah.
And these are a lot of the guys that are also getting married and getting divorced because they are boys. They don't know how to be in adult relationships. They don't know how to compromise, a lot of the things that we talk about. But it's funny how we are really focused on growth within the female spectrum, but not like boys are just
but it is happening, because when you ask for support and other kids, they are doing it. So
we're just not hearing about it.
Yeah, we're just not hearing about it.
OPI reached out. Sally Hansen reached out and sent my son nail polish in
Really?
his favorite colors. OPI
awesome.
has a manicure campaign, which is all focused on like men who want to paint their nails and like what it does for them, for their self-confidence. I just watched an interview with Billy Porter, who's like, I'm a dude in a dress, like get over it.
Yeah.
And I think that that's all just so important. If you guys knew how good it felt to wear a skirt on a really hot summer day, you might do it too.
I did the Scottish.
That's true.
I've worn a kilt. Does that count?
It does
Yeah,
count.
kilt.
Yeah.
I just walk around naked.
Or yoga
Hopefully
tights.
that's okay.
Yeah.
Same here.
Not in public.
That's what I'm doing wrong. God.
Don't go on. Just put a skirt on. It's a lot more comfortable. No, so many great takeaways, Melissa. I'm so glad you came on the podcast. To be honest with you, so many takeaways for a lot of parents out there, for me included. So thank you. I think we could talk to you forever about so many different topics, but you're a great example. You're a great mom. You're a great person. So thank you so much for what you do for so many people out there.
Yeah,
you're amazing.
Thank you for this opportunity. I haven't had the chance to talk about this very much, but it's nice to share it in a room full of people who understand. Clearly.
No, you're definitely an inspiration as not just a single parent, but as a parent. And I don't know if there's a distinction between that, because we're all just trying to raise happy, healthy kids. So
well, we talked about that a little bit before the podcast, like single parent. What does that mean?
If we can, I do just want to add one last thing. It's very easy to look at my social media feed and say, oh my gosh, she's doing it all. She's the CEO of this company. She's a New York Times bestselling author. She's a half-time single parent. But like, let's go back and dig behind the scenes. I am a half-time parent with a very good co-parent who takes my son, every other week. I have a full-time nanny. I have a job that lets me set my own hours and lets me take time off whenever I want to. So if my son is sick or, his nanny needs a day off, or I just decide to spend time with him, I can. I'm financially stable. I have a very supportive family who lives close, who will take my son anytime I want. Like, there is so much privilege that goes into the way that I parent. And I think it's incredibly important for us to acknowledge that, so that no one looking at us is feeling bad about how they can't do it all because they don't have access to the same resources or the same privilege.
Yeah, 100%. And I think you said everything there that I would have said in that situation too. Because people do compare themselves on social media, and they'll look at you and be like, "Oh man, why can't I be more like Melissa? Or why can't I be more like Drew or Evan?" Like, they seem to have it all figured out. But yes, there is privilege, and the situation is totally different. And at the end of the day, it's just important for everyone listening out there to remember that you're doing the best you can with what you have now. And once you know better, you do better. I know it's like going against human nature, but try not to compare yourself to other people, and especially what you see on social media. Because you see what we want you to see. You see what we want you to see. We struggle.
Yes. And I think it's really important for all of us to share every aspect. I don't talk about my son a ton on social media specifically, but like, he had a giant meltdown in a national park about 2 months ago, and I posted about it because life as a single parent is not always all sunshine, rainbows, and like colorful nails. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that there are moments where I feel lost, and moments where even with all the privilege I have, I feel like it's the hardest job in the world. And I feel like I'm always messing it up. And like, God, can I put another $100 in his therapy fund? You know, I think it's really important for all of us to acknowledge that so that we can show up authentically, because that's the only way we're able to connect with each other on this really difficult subject of single parenting, whatever that looks like.
We were talking about this on the drive over here, but that's what this podcast is about. It's the connection. Yeah. Because sometimes you feel so alone going through this. You're like, I'm the only one that's dealing with this. And the answer is no, you're not. Yeah. You know, everyone's going through hard times, whether, you know, you're married, you're divorced, whatever, you're widowed. We actually have had a lot of people reach out. I'm like, I'm a single parent because my husband or my wife died. Yeah. So, you know, we haven't even gotten to that, but it is not easy. Yeah. You know, parenting is a pain in the ass. Period. You know, you take one person out of the equation, it is that much more difficult.
Yeah. And it's not like competition, you know, like just, I see all of us on the same team. You know, we're all on the same team trying to do the best we can, raising our kids the best we know how from the experiences that we've had up until this point. And once we have more experiences and we learn from those, we'll continue to do better and progress forward. And that's why, you know, for me, it's helped me not to come from a place of judgment, to look at other people's situation and be like, oh, I would do this or I would do that. And Brene Brown's been a big help with that too, with her books, like looking at other people and saying that person's doing the best they can with what they have based on their experiences so far, and I can't judge them.
Nope.
So
it's all tools in the toolbox.
Yes.
Well, thank you again, Melissa. We really appreciate having you on.
My pleasure.
We'll be in touch because we'll probably have you on again soon. You'll probably bring up some other topic that we need to have her on again to talk about this.
I would love that.
Actually, I really like this idea of like the post-divorce Whole30 concept.
That's a great idea.
That's powerful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we could talk about that.
I like.
Yeah. If everyone wants to schedule their divorce around the same time, we can just all start at the same time.
That's September, divorce Whole30. So plan it September. Right?
If you can't laugh about it, right? You know.
You can't.
All right. Well, thanks, Melissa.
Thanks for tuning in to the Single Daddy Daily Podcast, hosted by Evan DeMarco and Drew Manning. Subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast platform, rate and review us to help spread the word. Find us on Instagram at Single Daddy Daily, Twitter at Single Dad Daily, and Facebook at Single Daddy Daily. For the latest articles, blog posts, podcasts, and more, visit our website at singledaddydaily.com and make sure to join our newsletter. Until next time.